Hey ladies, hey gentlemen, hey fellas, we've got one more game this week in week 1 of the preseason, and then it's off. It's done, and it's actually an important game. We're trying to see a rookie quarterback versus second-year quarterback who's basically a rookie since he hasn't really played, and Sam Ehlinger versus Jacob Eason for who's going to start the season for the Colts. Now, the news is starting to look nice that Carson Wentz might start the season, and that's fingers crossed what every Colts fan wants to see, and actual just fans of football in general. And if you're a fantasy fan, you want to see your players do better with the Colts at full strength. Quinn Nelson expected to be on the right side of that time frame as well. So maybe this actually doesn't all end up mattering, but for right now, it's a pretty close battle. So the Colts side, you have that. On the Panthers side, I'm excited to see some rookie players, right? We might see some Terrace Marshall, second-round pick, some Chuba Hubbard, a running back that they took later on out of Oklahoma State, and some nice undrafted free agents that are trying to make the roster, especially at the wide receiver position. This is all going to factor into the showdown slate, to any of the prop picks and the game, the betting line. So let's get into all of that right on now. So welcome into the channel. If you enjoy this content at any point, hit the like button. I greatly appreciate it. We're through 1 week of the preseason, and let's start off here on a showdown slate. We will go through position, but as always with these showdown slates in the preseason, just know that wide receivers will be the captain more often than not, and then defenses and running backs, yes, defenses, since they play the whole game, will be often in the captain spot, and usually not his own, but with more content being out there, that's starting to change. Now, defenses are going to be the best play. And if I had to pick one, we can start there with the defenses. I would pick both of them, to be honest with you, if you're playing just one lineup. But if you were forced to pick one, let's go with the Colts over the Panthers. I think that the Colts are going to be having at least somewhat better starting quarterback play. You have PJ Walker and Will Greer. The other side's not that much better, but just, maybe a little bit more pedigree. And for the most part, the Colts starting defense and secondary unit is far better than the Panthers, who spent all 7 of their draft picks in 2020 on defense to just start to slowly, after tearing it all down, rebuild that. So if I had to pick one, I would choose the Colts, but both defenses firmly in play. Now, if you go over to the quarterback position, yes, there's going to be 3 quarterbacks in play, one that I like the most. And the guy that I'm going to like the most is the mobile quarterback, and that's PJ Walker. If you remember the XFL, this was basically the XFL MVP. PJ Walker ended up going to Temple. Philip Walker, you may recall him as, and he's going to be the guy I like the most here. He's expected to start this game as Sam Darnold is not expected to play. I expect him to take the first half, and I expect Will Greer to take the second half. Now, he has that solid mobility. In the XFL, he had 99 rushing yards in 5 games, about 20 rushing yards per game, but when he was in college, he averaged about 24.7 rushing yards per game. And we just saw this on the Friday slate. Guys like Chris Strelliver have 55 yards on the ground, and they're easily one of the highest scoring quarterbacks. Felipe Franks does nothing in the air, absolutely nothing. Get you basically a donut in the air, but he has 76 rushing yards, and he's one of the best quarterbacks that we saw through Thursday and Friday's games because of that. So the rushing upside is going to have a massive edge here, even if it's just 30 yards on the ground. I mean, that's canceling out the 75 yards that Jacob Eason is going to have. So I do like Philip Walker the best, but you surely don't have to play a quarterback. I mean, if you're playing both defenses, maybe get a running back and a couple of receivers. It's probably the optimal way to go there. But if you wanted to pick a quarterback, it would be, for me, Philip Walker. The problem that you're going to find on the Colts side of the ball is that they have 3 quarterbacks now. They do have Brett Hundley, the former draft pick by the Green Bay Packers, on this roster, former Arizona Cardinals backup. So that's the issue there, and they're saying that he's going to play. So if Hundley plays the 4th quarter, there's only 3 quarters left to be split up between Jacob Eason and Sam Ehlinger, so they're naturally going to play less with not as much mobility. So if I had to choose one, I would end up actually choosing Sam Ehlinger, who's been looking better in camp, and apparently is going to be coming in second here against worse defensive players. And the nice thing for Ehlinger is that he does have rushing upside. He averaged 41.4 rushing yards per game, over 1,900 rushing yards in 46 college games at Texas, averaged about 8 yards per attempt, and had over a 60% completion percentage each of his last 3 seasons. So yes, I would rank it right now. Philip Walker, who I think plays 2 quarters with mobile upside, and then Sam Ehlinger, who I think plays about a quarter and a half with mobile upside. Those would really be the only 2 quarterbacks I go to. Eason not totally out of play, but I mean, for the most part, he only had 1 good year in college. 2024th rounder with not much mobility. Now we can move over to the running back position, where there's a couple of guys who are going to stand out. Now, as of this recording, there's no news on if Marlon Mack, Nyheim Hines, and Jonathan Taylor are going to play. I'm going to assume that Jonathan Taylor isn't playing in this game. Mack maybe sees a drive or 2 off the Achilles tear. We'll see there. Same thing for Nyheim Hines. But I'm thinking that right now, this is a man in Jordan Wilkins who's in a unique situation in the NFL. Jordan Wilkins is very similar to Royce Freeman, or at least what Royce Freeman was going to be. Mike Boone for the Denver Broncos got carted off from practice at camp the other day, which gave more opportunity to Royce Freeman now to become the running back 3 if Boone is hurt long term. But it was a situation where Freeman was looking like he was going to be cut. Redundant skill set with Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon already on the roster. Maybe he still will be cut, but solid NFL running backs that will get picked up by somebody else. Just like Jordan Wilkins here. This is a loaded depth chart now with Nyheim Hines, who has his role. Jonathan Taylor clearly clearly a focal point of the offense. And Marlon Mack, I assume, has the inside track for RB3, but Wilkins here, I do believe, gets some good run. He's 6'1" and 216 pounds. He's had a lot of NFL experience, the 2018 fifth rounder. He ended up seeing 32 total touches for over 130 yards. He has 19 catches in his last 25 games as a part-time player. I think Wilkins sees some good run. He is one of my running backs. There's 4 for the most part, and if anything changes, like I'm recording this one early on Saturday morning because I'll be actually traveling and going to a river for the next couple of days, yes, so I'm looking forward to that, but I won't be here. We might be live back in time for the Sunday before this starts, but I won't be here. I'll be updating on Patreon for any news that comes out, so just be tracking all that, down below. In the description, there's Patreon with all the tiers, all the notes that will be updated, the rankings for every single preseason slate, the optimizer. Check it all out. I encourage you to. Now, if we move forward with more running backs who stand out, Christian McCaffrey not expected to play in this one. Chuba Hubbard was a 2021, this past year, 4th round pick. He's very fast. He's 6 foot. He actually weighed in higher than expected at 208 pounds. People were expecting like 198-pound running back, so this is good to see, bigger than people thought. He had a breakout in college in 2019 with over 2,000 plus yards on the ground. He's caught 53 balls in 33 games. I think they probably give him 2 drives here, right? Their 4th round pick, see what they have in him. See if he is the backup over some of these undrafted guys since you put draft capital in him. That's what we're assuming, but can we actually see that on the field? And he does have some versatility. So if you're able to get 2 drives out of him here, he plays a quarter. I think there's some upside there. Now, there are some other guys. So that's 2 running backs, Jordan Wilkins and Chuba Hubbard. There are some other guys on this team that I do like. One of them would be Rodney Smith. Rodney Smith is a 2020 undrafted free agent. Did not get to play because there was no preseason last year. And in 2020, he played in 7 games, right? There was no Christian McCaffrey, so he had 41 touches on the ground. And he was pretty decent. He averaged about 4.5 yards per touch. He had 9 catches on 11 targets as well. So he's had some NFL experience. He had 65 college catches in 53 games. So this is a pass-catching back, Rodney Smith, who should probably play himself about a quarter in this game. And then after that, you do have a pretty deep depth chart at the running back position for Carolina. So it is hard to pick off some guys. Like you have Spencer Brown, a 2021 undrafted free agent, probably sees some 4th quarter run. Darius Clark, Mikey Daniel, Rod Smith. They have a Rodney and a Rod Smith. Yes, they're 2 different guys on this team. Trenton Cannon, the former 6th rounder for the Jets in 2018. So many guys. If I had to choose one more guy out of all these guys, I'd choose Reggie Bonifant, who has been on this team twice now, a 2018 undrafted free agent, sort of a bigger back at 212 pounds. He had 14 touches in 2021. He's been solid in his NFL career, averaging close to 7 yards per touch, and he's a decent pass-catching back. So those would be some of the guys on Carolina. Now, there are some other guys, if you're looking at the running back position, I will throw out the names Benny LeMay and Deon Jackson. They're kind of further down the depth chart, especially Deon Jackson for the Colts. But Deon Jackson is more of a mystery. He's a 2021 undrafted free agent. They probably want to see what they have in him. Bigger back at 218 pounds. He wasn't great in college, only averaged 4 yards per carry at Duke. Not great at all. But he did catch over 60 balls in 44 games. So that's kind of your late dart throw. Probably plays a drive or 2 in the 4th quarter. But the priorities at running back are going to be Jordan Wilkins, Chuba Hubbard, and probably for me, Reggie Bonifant, Rodney Smith. Let's go over now to the wide receiver position. And so far, we've had 4 days of preseason props dating back to last Thursday's opener, and we've had 4 days of profitable days, at least from the props that we've been taking on some of these shows. So with that being said, this is an early prop. There's not all the props out yet on Prize Picks. I'd encourage you to try out Prize Picks. You get a first bet for free up to a $100 match using the code SAL down below. It's just player props, over-unders. So I'm going to take PJ Walker under 98 passing yards, 98.5. Yes, I like PJ Walker, but I'm assuming that he's not going to have 100 yards passing in this game, even if he plays the first half. I mean, the guy's not a great passer by any means. And if you're only giving him a half of football against better defenders in that first half, I'm not going to take it. I'm going to take more so the rushing yards. We haven't seen that many guys throwing for over 100 yards, right, so far in the preseason. Saturday, you might have seen some because there's some actually better quarterbacks. The Justin Fields, the Trey Lances actually get out there and attempt to play. Guys play 3 quarters. But if a guy's going to play 2 quarters here and he's not that great, I'm going to take the under. And the reason we play him for fantasy is the upside for him to have 30 to 50 rushing yards on the ground. He can have 80 passing yards, maybe a touchdown. He can still score you 12 fantasy points, 10 fantasy points as a quarterback, but he doesn't have to have 100 passing yards. So I take the under on PJ Walker. I take the over on Chuba Hubbard, 3.5 points. Now, if news comes out later on, I'll update it on Patreon that he's not going to play that much because they see him as the firm RB2 and he's only going to play 1 or 2 drives. Well, if he's only going to play 1 drive, we don't want this over 3.5 points. But for a pass-catching running back, the second he catches 2 balls, the second he has 1 decent run, he's going to be hitting this over of 3.5. 3.5 is a solid number. Usually it's around 2.9, 3.2. They're obviously understanding that this is a better running back as a 4th-round pick this past year. So the over 3.5 on Chuba Hubbard. There'll be a lot more props to come out. I'll add them over on the Discord. But if you have any questions, let me know down below. For other props, I would encourage you to try it out. That code SAL. Free bet up to $100. Limited time only for right now. So take advantage of it while it's hot, while it's lasting. You can chase that one, tail that one, or any other props you'd like. Go get them dollar rooskies y'all. So we head over to the wide receiver position, and maybe my favorite play on the slate. This was one of my favorite guys to scout coming out. He's a small school guy, but he's just a massive size speed specimen, and I'm happy to hear and say that he's standing out in Colts camp. And this is Mike Strachan. And Mike Strachan went to Charleston. So he's a 2021 7th rounder, the first pick of the 7th round, I believe. He's 6'5", 226 pounds, and fast as hell. I mean, they don't make these guys that often. This is literally like DK Metcalf, AJ Brown's style of a player in terms of how big and fast he is. He grades out similarly. Now, he went to a weaker competition, smaller school, so that's why he's getting picked in the 7th round and not the 2nd round. But in his 2 main seasons at Charleston, he combined for over 125 receptions, over 1,400 yards, and 27 touchdowns. He's a big body receiver. He scores touchdowns. He's standing out in camp. He's expected to be, like, right now fighting for a roster spot, so like the wide receiver 6, 7 on the roster. I expect him to probably play a quarter to a quarter and a half here. Mike Strachan just profiles out as one of the best options at the wide receiver position, one of the better captain options for you. Now, Zach Pascal is probably one of the best wide receiver 4s in the NFL right now. He's a wide receiver 4, him like James Washington style players. I expect him to see some run, 1 to 2 quarters, but he's pretty firmly on this team. In 2019, he operated on the Colts as the wide receiver 4, and he did run 31 preseason routes. He only had 1 catch for 33 yards and 3 targets. Just know that he's in play for a showdown slate. He could easily have a 2-catch, 25-yard game, and that might be enough. I prefer Mike Strachan over him. Another guy that I think is similar in terms of just the way that he profiles out to a Mike Strachan is 2026 rounder Desmond Patman. So Desmond Patman didn't get to play in the preseason last year, and I told you Stratton was, 6'5", 226 pounds. Patton came out last year 6'4", 220 pounds with a lot of speed. So these two freaks of nature, one a 6th-round pick, one a 7th-round pick, are both going to be on the field for the Colts in this game. Now, the problem is Patton didn't play any football in 2020. He was a 6th-rounder, but he didn't play for the Colts. He didn't end up playing, and he never went over 820 yards in 4 years of college or a 13% target share. So even though he was this high, fast, big monster speed guy, he didn't separate enough. He wasn't dominating enough in college, even at not one of the greatest schools, to actually get himself some massive target shares and some massive years. So that's your one concern, whereas Mike Stratton showed that. Yes, a small school, but he showed that he was actually the alpha there. Desmond Patton fit like an alpha, didn't produce like one. But Patton and Strachan are probably my favorite Colts receivers, and maybe even overall before we get into Carolina. There's another guy I would just want to mention is Ashton Dulin. Dulin played in the 2019 preseason for the Colts. He ran 38 routes in 3 games, so you're getting about 13 routes run per game out of him. Had 2 catches in that one. So I do think that they want to see if Ashton Dulin can make the roster this time around. He's probably not going to have as good of a chance as some of these 6th, 7th round draft picks from the last couple of years, but that's where I would go for 4 receiver options from the Colts, the top 2 being Mike Strachan and Desmond Patton. And these receivers overall are probably going to be your best options. Now we head over to the Panthers side, and I'll mention one guy. I don't think he plays enough unless we get more news. I'll update it. But Terrace Marshall, he's already kind of expected to be the starting slot plus receiver for this Carolina team. He's reconnected with Joe Brady from college. So Terrace Marshall, I don't expect to see too much run, like an insane amount of run, if any, but he's going to be a massive red zone threat. He might even just be in on red zone packages for 1 or 2 drives in this game. Probably don't want to play him. I don't think he plays as much, but just mentioning it that he is, if he does play 1 or 2 drives, he's definitely in play. But there's 3 guys that I prioritize on this Panthers team. The first one is Omar Bayless. He's a 2020 undrafted free agent. He's got decent speed, 6'1" and 212 pounds, but what he did in college was insane. A 31% target share in his final year at Arkansas, 93 receptions, 1,653 yards, and 17 touchdowns. He didn't play football in 2020. Not a lot of guys did. They didn't have a preseason to showcase their skill set. But yes, Omar Bayless is a monster. I think there's an over-under of 3 fantasy points on him. I'm leaning right now. It's really close for that one, right? Leaning the over. We have another rookie, a 2021 6th-rounder, Shi Smith. Now, this is a smaller receiver who, for the most part, doesn't profile out as somebody who should be drafted. 5'9", 185 pounds, and slow, so he doesn't have the speed as a burner. Now, in 2020 at South Carolina, he had a 29% target share, but he never had more than 675 yards in a season. So this is another guy. This is kind of like the Desmond Patton, Mike Strachan example we just showed you. I'd rather have Omar Bayless because although he didn't play football last year, he's just a better size, and also he showed you in college that he was more dominating. So far, I'd probably rank it Mike Strachan, Omar Bayless, and then Desmond Patton out of the receivers based on the current news we have. That could change. And then finally, for wide receivers, Krishan Hogan is all the way at the end, it seems, right now in camp of the depth chart for the Panthers. He did play in the 2019 preseason, and he played a lot. He had 98 routes run. He had 12 catches, 132 yards, and 16 targets. So a massive preseason player then. In college, he had a 45% dominator, which if you're in the 45%, that's in the upper elite echelon, just in terms of how many targets and overall yardage and all this combination that you had for your college program. He's a 2017 undrafted free agent. He's built like some of these other guys we talked about, 6'3", 225 pounds, and he's fast. So Krishan Hogan, I think he doesn't play until probably like the 4th quarter. He probably plays a lot with Will Grier. I think he's at least worth mentioning. Those are 5 receivers that stand out. We talked about 8 total receivers, but 5 that stand out more so Stratton, Desmond Patton, Omar Bayless, Shai Smith, and Krishan Hogan. Now for tight ends, you're not going to get much tight end help here, right? Especially on a showdown slate. Like if you had to play one, there's some decent options. Like Kylan Grayson for the Colts is the best tight end on the slate. He's a 2021 fourth rounder. He's been taking first team reps out of SMU. He had at least a 12% target share or higher in all 4 years at college. 129 receptions in 37 games is about 3.5 receptions per game. And he's standing out in camp. So Kylan Grayson, if there was a tight end to play, it would be him. The problem is, for the most part, tight ends just, there's 4 or 5 of them. They're blocking a lot. They're not running as many routes. Maybe he runs 10 routes, but there's going to be a bunch of receivers in this game probably running 14 to 18 routes. So that's your concern right there for Kylan Grayson. They're not as deep routes down the field. If you were to choose a tight end, it would be Kylan Grayson. If for some reason you wanted to at least know about a tight end on the Panthers, Tommy Tremble is a 2021 third-round pick. He's got solid speed. He had 35 total receptions in 19 college games, but for the most part, he came out as this blocking tight end. They still have Ian Thomas out there. They've got like Steven Solomon and Giovanni Ricci, some other tight ends down the depth chart. But since you don't have to roster a tight end, I'm not going to make you roster these guys who are probably going to have one catch for 7 yards, right? So stick to the wide receivers, stick to the defenses, get 1 or 2 running backs into your lineup, and that's how you want to build a winning lineup. The wide receivers and the defenses are going to anchor preseason showdowns. I appreciate you tuning in today. Please do, before you go, hit the like and subscribe button, and let me know if you have any questions down below in the comment section. Let me know as well, who is your favorite play on the slate if you are still here? I'll be updating the rankings and the tiers and the notes on Patreon below, and then we head into preseason week 2 with even more content and even more season-long content coming out every single day. We had a draft's coming out later in the day depending on when you're watching this, a mock draft. You can check that out. It's actually a legit draft, $25 Best Ball Mania, so check that all out on the channel here. Support the sponsor of the show, Prize Picks. Use the code SAL even if you don't want to play these props tonight. By the time the season comes, the offer for a free $100 match, free $100 bet using the code SAL might not be there, so use it while it lasts. Appreciate y'all, and I'll see you in the next one. Preseason week 1 in the books.